Welcome to Dulles. We're a community of faith that embodies the love of Jesus for the good of our neighbor and renewal of our world. We're so glad you're listening.
So this has been a week that for many would say this is a watershed moment that's happening, and we will see continue to unfold. Others have said, wait, I don't really understand that. Really? Is it? I've gotten so many notes, so many texts, phone calls this week from within our church, from outside of our church, from various friends. When I learned of the shooting this week, a film festival board member told me, texted me. And my deep concern that I want to address is I've never expressed fear for our country before. I've been afraid. I grew up as a kid afraid of nuclear fallout, living close to Washington, D.C. Those are things that our high schools talked about. So there was fear in the late 70s and early 80s during the Cold War, that kind of fear. I have never felt the fear that I feel today. And, you know, I follow Jesus, and I trust him. And so I really work to give him my fear. But my fear today is that we are so upside down believing this paradigm that we're to filter everything through politics. Everything. Anything that happens out in the public, personal views, relationships, people that we should get to know or invest time in, immediately goes through the filter of, well, what's the political view here? What's the political angle? And it is destructive, and we are all falling for it. We're falling for this lie. When did politics become the benchmark, the compass for how we determine life in our future? And I've really seen it and heard it this week so much. And so we had our big family wedding in Detroit this weekend. My nephew got married. And we just woke up yesterday and we all kind of said it. I said, I think I need to fly home. I think I need to. And last night I flew home. And I want to give you an anecdote about what my week has been like. And I'm maybe kind of making light of it. I think I have to at this point, just the text. And I can take it. Don't feel like you shouldn't text. Well, I don't want to bother Brad now because apparently he gets bombarded. I enjoy it and I can take it. And it's part of my role. And so don't stop. But here's a picture of my week. So I leave the wedding view last night in an Uber to the Detroit airport. And my Uber driver, really nice guy, and you know, Amy's always like, you just talk to everybody. You can't stop talking. And I do. I always talk to I'm asking the Uber driver, how, you a Detroit native? And he was. And I'm going to tell you for a specific reason that he was a black man. And, you know, here's a black man and a white man that ends up in this conversation because of something he says to me. We're talking about sports and, you know, how late he works, working 2 jobs and driving an Uber. And then after a little silence, he said, hey, can I ask you what you think about the shooting that happened this week? And I said, yeah, what's your thought? And I actually said, that's funny, I'm actually headed to the airport because I'm a pastor, and we're going to talk about this tomorrow morning in church. And he said, I have a friend who is so just heartbroken over this shooting. He said, I didn't really know who Charlie Kirk was. And then he said it like this. He said, and before you comment, because I'm going to ask you why, he said, my close friend is also black. And I can't understand why she's so upset that he was shot and killed. And I'm not going to begin to try to answer that question. I don't know this guy. I don't know his friend. There's no context. So we had a good conversation. It's just interesting to me that it's like, wow. I mean, this is on so many people's minds and hearts. And it was interesting to hear his filter. He gave me kind of his perspective on his filter. He's trying to figure out why his friend of a certain demographic is torn up and upset when other people isn't. And this is the complexity that we live in. We live in a world where we think we understand demographics, the paradigms, the way things should work, and we're surprised. We're finding ourselves more and more surprised. And so this guy wants me to tell him why his friend is so upset. And I tried my best, just very high level. I don't want to be preachy ever. So I tried to give him my perspective that I think our filtering is wrong. I think we're viewing everything through politics. But social media was a disaster this week. Things that I saw on TikTok, I could not believe that I got to hundreds, and then I started saying, I think it's thousands are talking this way. That he kind of had it coming, or when you believe these things, this is kind of what happens. And man, I'm telling you, that's a part of what scares me, that we will filter to that degree now. How our country, right and left, and I'm going to put a lot of Christianity in the bucket on the right, how we have come to the point of believing, and I know we believe it. People will say, well, I don't believe politics is the answer. Oh, yes, they do. And I'm almost saying, yes, you do, but oh, yes, America does, because of the way we talk, because of our interactions, because of what upsets us, and the filter in which we become upset or heartbroken. So I've got just a few thoughts here that I believe are God's heart, and I'm going to trust him with that. I don't want it to seem too dramatic that I decided to fly home and address this when I could have done that next week. I don't know. I'm following what I really believe is God's heart for the answer and the solution of what's going to solve this, what's going to solve our divide. Our enemy, I swear to you, I know this is true. I wish I could somehow prove it. Our enemy today, your enemy is division. That is the enemy. It really actually is not the guy who thinks such an obnoxious thought or who votes or this or it really isn't. That actually is not your enemy. Division is threatening a lot today, and it's on just an escalating scale. It's getting worse and worse. And again, I'm not addressing one side or another. It's just this is a part of where we are as Americans today. And Jesus has a lot to say about this. And so for the next few minutes, I want to zero us again in on the real solution. We're going to do a series in the near future about the one singular kingdom that is actually left. There have been a lot of kingdoms on earth. It's an interesting part of history. There's one that really matters, and it's here, and Jesus brought it. And some of us live and talk and interact as if that's not even a thing. Jesus actually brought a kingdom to this world, and if you are serious about engaging the way of Jesus and following him means you become an agent of this new kingdom, and it does not look like anything you see on TikTok today or CNN or Fox News. I mean, it is totally antithetical to any of those paradigms. So let's talk about what that looks like. I'm going to just use the Uber moment last night and my new Uber friend from Detroit just letting me in on and trusting me with this question about his friend, and it kind of alluded to race a little bit. I'm going to segue from that, maybe oddly, into why we celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Day every January as a church. This is deeply, deeply important to me. It is a commitment I made years ago. Our leadership is all in on this. We come here to worship Jesus. We don't come here really to elevate particular people. That's an exception for me, and I want to give you a couple reasons. I so believe his dream, And I credit you too with this a little bit, because in the 80s, when I'm learning a lot about Martin Luther King Jr. and what his dream really meant, U2 released Pride, one of my all-time favorite songs about the life of Martin Luther King Jr. Early morning, April 4, a shot rings out in the Memphis sky. Free at last, free at last. They took your life, but they could not take your pride. That song got into me as I'm in the classroom learning about Martin Luther King Jr. His dream, to me, matched some of my theology that I was learning as a late teen and early in my 20s, that Jesus' dream is that heaven, through you and me, through his followers, heaven would increasingly find its way on earth. Let me ask you, just in a challenging kind of way, do you pray daily what Jesus instructed you to pray? That God's kingdom through you would arrive on earth? And I'm not really, sometimes I say, hey, answer out loud. And I don't really mean that right now. You don't need to answer out loud. But do you? I expect you do. And if you don't, it's okay. That just informs me that where you are in understanding what Jesus did in coming here. You are to be an agent of God's kingdom arriving in your street, at your your place of work, in your school. Not preachy, not carrying a big Bible around and lecturing or preaching down to people. That's not what he's talking about at all. Demonstrating the image and character, the growing character in you of Jesus, where people are encountering something they do not see on CNN or Fox News or TikTok. Not even close. They see something beautiful and different and attractive in you. Do you pray that way? Because Jesus tells you to. In the Sermon on the Mount, in the Lord's Prayer, we are told to pray. And I resonate with Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream, among other things I see in culture and among other leaders, because his dream was this idea that more of heaven can happen in our generation. We can see the movement of God through Scripture, away from slavery, away from the way women have been treated. And we can actually be part of the movement of resurrection, of renewal happening on this earth. And as his church, as his follower, I can be part of that. And I'm going to pray for it. So that's one reason. Every January, we celebrate the dream of Martin Luther King Jr. But another reason is someone tried to silence that dream. And so I want to repeat it over and over. I want my girls grew up in a house where that dream was repeated. I mean, they know about history of what suppressed that dream, what threatened it, and what the chaos that we had to go through to step into this new picture of heaven coming to earth. More of what Eden looked like and what Eden will look like again when Jesus finishes this process of renewal. And so I'm going to take the risk here of one comparison between Charlie Kirk's assassination this week and what we celebrate every January as a church. And it's this. And I'm using the word assassination because it was. And in my generation, in my girls' generation, this is the first real assassination I can think of in America, not of a politician, similar to MLK, not an actual politician, but someone who's influencing culture to whatever degree, good or bad. That doesn't matter. That's not a part of this conversation today. We're not going to parse or dissect Charlie Kirk's views. Someone was silenced because of what they believe and what they speak. And that, if that doesn't alarm all of us, your political filter should disappear at that moment, because everybody's fair game. Can you imagine walking into a classroom and never being able to express a viewpoint or ask a particular question that's not allowed? Or you're removed from the classroom because you have that question or you have that thought? What should scare all of us is that free speech and our ability to express what we believe and what our convictions are, and maybe someday what we believe about our God. Seems to be fair game right now. Whether it's somebody losing their job because of what they believe, or somebody just feeling intimidated to say out loud what they believe. That's what alarms me, and if there's a comparison at all to what I celebrate so much every year in the life of Martin Luther King Jr. is, someone tried to silence that dream or his voice, and I just never want your voice to become silenced. Jesus is the Word. He came to speak the heart and reality and message of God, our God. In the beginning, the Word spoke and created. We have Scripture as the Word or words of God. Free speech is our First Amendment, and I'm not really trying to compare America to God's kingdom. In fact, I think the right gets into a lot of trouble in that way and has messed things up in trying to see some kind of parallel between God's kingdom coming to earth and American politics. And I challenge people on the right constantly. And if you're on the right, you've been in those conversations with me. I think the right sees America and the Capitol building and the White House somehow as God's kingdom arriving. And what I want to say to the left this week particular, and it may not be you, it may be no one you know, but there are many, many people, it has shocked me, who are celebrating, somehow quietly justifying that this shooting happened. Maybe they wouldn't say, well, I've justified it, but sort of like, well, but didn't he kind of have this coming? You should look in the mirror if you've had that thought and do some deep contemplative thinking about God's kingdom and how radically different God's kingdom is from the idea that someone deserves or someone had it coming. In Luke 22, Jesus has just finished the Last Supper, and immediately the arrest scene happens. The soldiers arrive, arrest Jesus. Judas betrays Jesus with the kiss. The disciples are outraged. What is happening? And you can read this in each of the gospel accounts. This is Luke's account. When Jesus' followers saw what was going to happen, that Jesus is actually going to be apprehended. Are you kidding? They said, Lord, should we strike with our swords? And one of them, we know from another gospel, it's actually Peter. Of all people, Peter does this. One of them struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his right ear. But Jesus answered, no more of this. And when there's an exclamation point in the English translation, this is like an emphatic, stop! What are we doing? You're acting like them. That's what Jesus is saying. No more of this. And he touched the man's ear and healed him. If ever in history I can think of a moment where violence or the defense of violence against a person was ever justified, it'd probably be this. I'm probably like, yeah, Peter. And the other ear. But Jesus, even in this moment, even as the arrest is happening, he's just revealing a totally different concept. When he says he's brought a different kingdom, I mean, it is radically different. And imagine the disciples defending Jesus after the Last Supper. They just walked outside. The arrest is happening. The disciples are defending him. And Jesus now is rebuking the disciples for this act of violence, particularly Peter. I can't stress enough how completely antithetical this kingdom is from what we see every day, what we hear every day, the loud opinions we see and hear every day. This takes me to my next thought, that Jesus has to be our passion. If you're thinking, well, how do I get rid of my political filter? I wake up to the Washington Post, or I wake up to Fox News, and just your day is structured. And again, when I say you, I just mean us as a culture in general. Our day is structured this way. We almost don't know how to escape it. How do we have a different filter? Your filter has to become Jesus. And I don't mean in a cliched kind of way where Jesus is my Lord and Savior. I mean, Jesus' words, his character. We've spent part of the summer looking at the fruit of the Spirit in Galatians. Like, what does someone who follows Jesus look like? What do we actually look like? What is our character becoming? How is the old me melting away and being dissolved by the character of Jesus? And we've gone through each of what Paul calls in his metaphor, the fruit, the evidence, this beautiful evidence of God's character growing in us. This has to be our filter. It has to be. And if I know you're here this morning because you care and you are following Jesus, or you're interested in following Jesus, or what that looks like. But if you're not interested in the character of Jesus becoming your filter over your political passion, I would love to sit and chat with you about that and spend some time with you about that. But that's not the trajectory Jesus is calling you to. He's calling you to surrender your opinions. And it doesn't mean your opinions don't matter and that you shouldn't vote. We say this all the time. Of course we should care about our country. Of course we're all going to have nuances. Amy and I disagree on some political issues. And we're good for it. It's actually really good. I learn things from her, and she learns, and we learn about conversation and debate. And I do this with some of you. I don't debate politics with many of you, but there's a few of you where we do. And it's healthy, and we hug each other. And we get in the car like, man, that was good. Not because, we've politically kind of figured it out, but because Jesus is our filter. He's our lens. He has a strategy for healing this earth. It really actually is not going to be the right or the left. It actually isn't. It never will be. If you think, the next election, you are trapped in a cycle. You will never, ever have that play out. Jesus' kingdom is the solution. His heart and his character. That must become the growing filter or lens by which we enter conversations. Hard things happen. People approach us with tough questions. Something angers us in our country. You can be angry and still act like Jesus. Paul said there's faith, there's hope, and there's love. But man, the greatest is love. Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, hey, if you're going to follow me, if you're going to step into this kingdom, you're going to have to learn my character in loving your enemies. And I posted about this a few days ago. This isn't love like you got to feel better about your enemies. It means love in action. You're going to demonstrate. You're going to actually behave in a way that is love toward this person. And if you're like, what? What does that even look like? I'm just inviting you to follow Jesus. Because that's a lot of what following Jesus is about. In that portion in Matthew 5, Jesus says, you've heard that it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Protect yourself. Be guarded. And of course we need boundaries, and there's scriptural context for having healthy boundaries with certain people, and of course. But Jesus is just talking about the person that's just on the other side of you. But I tell you, in my kingdom, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Do you do that? Did you do that on Monday and Tuesday this week? When you wake up tomorrow or sometime in your day, are you going to pray for the people who are making life hard for you? Because in God's kingdom, that's what you do. And by the way, it's not just this thought, it actually changes things. There's actually power in that kind of prayer. Do this because you are children of your Father. Okay, listen to 1 John 4. This is the Apostle John writing this. Dear friends, let us love each other because love comes from God. Those who love are God's children, and they know God. If you're already thinking, they need to learn how to love, you've missed it. You've already missed it. This isn't written to them, to that guy at work, to that loud, obnoxious. This is written to you. Those who love are God's children, and they know God. Those who do not love do not know God, because God is love. He is love. As you step into this kingdom and following Jesus, love just begins to permeate you. You find yourself praying for that Republican Actually praying for them. And not the prayer, God changed them, they're wrong, they're so obnoxious. Not that kind of prayer. Praying like, God, their story, it breaks my heart what happened 10 years ago. This is such a beautiful person. And when they struggle to be beautiful, I see the beauty. Or this Democrat, they struggle outwardly to be beautiful, but I see your beauty in them. God has shown his love to us by sending his only Son into the world. God did this so that we might have life through Christ. This is love. It is not that we loved God, but that he loved us. John's making it clear, God didn't love us because we were trying to be good to him. We were trying to be religious. He came when we were his enemy. We came when we were opposed to him. We are indicted for crucifying Jesus. Well, that's when he came, because of his love for you and me. For God sent his Son to pay for our sins with his own blood. This is John's way of saying, when you were opposed to God, when you were offensive to God, he came to die for you, to give his life for you. Dear friends, if God loved us that much, then we should love each other. Okay, the third thing I want to say, I'm going to go to Alton's favorite text in the Bible, Philippians 2. And we read this 2 or 3 times a year here. It's so important. It's been such an important place in Scripture for me in my life for many years, for a couple of decades. Philippians 2, and I'm almost near the end here. Bring your thinking into line, and this is the New Testament for everyone version. It's a newer version in recent years, and I really love the language, this translation. It's considered a more accurate modern translation. Bring your thinking into line with one another. Now, is Paul going to tell us through political dialogue and figuring things out politically? Bring your thinking into line with one another by having some kind of sane political? No. Here's how to do it, Paul says. Hold on to the same love. Have the same love. This is personified. This is about Jesus. You're going to find unity when you hold on to the love of Jesus. This is going to be the beginning point for culture, for you, for your culture within your family and the arguments or the division. And if you can't find that within your family, find it with people, not fellow Democrats or fellow Republicans, but people who are holding on to the love of Jesus as the love that defines you. Bring your innermost lives into harmony. Fix your minds on the same object. Not cultural agreement, but Jesus. The same object is the love of Jesus. Never act out of selfish ambition or vanity. Instead, regard everybody else as more important than yourself. This is the kingdom Jesus brought. And if you're not ready for this kingdom, that's okay. That's okay. That's honest. But make no mistake, this is the kingdom Jesus is calling you into. It is not a Republican Democrat kingdom. That will just never, ever, ever work for you. Never act out of selfish ambition or vanity, and of course we do. And so we surrender those moments to Jesus. God, this was ugly. I was emotional. I was defensive again. Jesus, make me more like you. That's the life of surrender. Regard everybody else as more important than yourself. Look after each other's best interest, not your own. People are persuaded by you about your life, your cultural views, your own brokenness being expressed, and how you've been broken and how you found healing. This is what persuades people. Somebody going on one of these talk shows that we get obsessed with and saying over and over again loudly how the other side is wrong is never going to persuade anybody. What's going to persuade people is you telling your story of brokenness and how Jesus has healed you and given you hope. This is how you should think among yourselves with the mind that you have because you belong to the Messiah, Jesus, who though in God's form equal to the Father, did not regard equality with God as something he ought to. And this is scary. This is, if you're holding on to your politics, there's nothing more scary than what we're about to read. He did not regard his equality with the Father as something he ought to exploit. It's this picture of grasping hold to him being God, Jesus being God. Instead, he emptied himself. This is surrender language. I'm going to surrender being right. I'm going to surrender my need to be right, my need to be in control. And he received the form of a slave, being born in the likeness of humans, and then, having human appearance, he humbled himself and became obedient even to death. Yes, even the death of the cross. And so God the Father exalted him. God will exalt you. God will do the elevating in your life. Let him do that. Your job is to lower yourself. And so I'm going to start practicing something. And I'm not doing this as kind of a political statement at all. It has nothing to do with politics. This has to do with Jesus' new kingdom. When you text me, and I hope you'll continue to text me, when you text me with that meme or those, and this actually spans some friends around the country and in some of the film festival world and among many of you here, when you text that picture or that meme or that statement about how ridiculous the other side is, I'm going to ask you, those of you I know well, if I don't know you that well, I probably will not word it this way, but I'm going to ask you if you're praying for God to use you to bring his kingdom to earth this week. And what does that look like? And can I encourage you? Can I encourage you in that? What can I be doing to help you with that? I'm going to be asking you how you're really reaching into the story of the person on the other side and getting to know them and learning to love them, how you can love them and encourage them and support them. That is the kingdom. If you want to be a part of our church and what we're about, we're going to put our purpose on the screen here again. We are building a community here, and we're dead serious about it. And we're not going to do this perfectly because we're following the only one who's perfect. But we're going to give this our best shot. We're building a community here that embodies, that images, displays the character and the reality of Jesus for the good of our neighbor. And one of the Pharisees said, okay, Jesus, well then who's my neighbor? And Jesus described somebody so different than the Pharisee, like really different. Neighbor looks a lot different than you. For the good of our neighbor and for the renewal of our world, because you and I are now part of a kingdom that is bringing what matters to God and his power and his love and his solution to this world. Okay, hey band, Adam, Rudy, you guys come, you're going to close us in a song here. Okay, hear these final words. I want to talk about putting this into practice this week, because that's what Jesus calls us to. Don't just listen, don't just be hearers, actually do. People who are in my kingdom, they're actually doing what I'm teaching and modeling. If you're new here and you're trying church again after some hurt, or maybe just there's reasons to be cautious about church, I get it. We get it. I've been hurt by church. I've been hurt by people who love Jesus, and that's confusing. That's confusing, and we all have. Many of us have. My challenge to you is to try to build trust here. Give it time. Get into some relationships. Go to a football watch party with us and hang out. Or get into a short-term midweek community and get to know some people and see if some trust can be built. Because we're really, really serious about building trust here, telling our stories of weakness and brokenness in God's healing. If you're not new here, if you're a part of our church family, here's my expectation for you. And I just expect this of you, just as I expect you to actually pray what Jesus has taught you to pray. I'm also expecting you that you will tell Jesus every day that you want to care about him. You want to seek first him and his kingdom more than a democratic worldview or a Republican worldview. Will you start praying that with me? Will you ask Jesus to just loosen, release, melt away the filter that our world is operating by today? And would you ask him to replace that lens with what matters to him? What's his solution? I'm not going to try anymore, Jesus, to prove this person wrong. I'm going to just try to love them. Is it possible that me loving this person in the next 3 or 4 years might actually persuade them? And not politically, but just in the other ways that I can't even imagine? Jesus, I want you to have this way in my heart, in my mind. And I want you to pray for the person who's your enemy. This is my expectation. If you're going to be part of this movement here at Dulles Church, really the Church of Jesus, I'm just expecting this of you, that you will be praying for the enemy. You will be praying for the person who has hurt you, offended you, or maybe there is a boundary. You can still pray for somebody when you have a boundary in place with them. And you're going to see the world change around you. I'm watching it happen in people's lives. It's just amazing. Because the filter is love. And it's not whether they agree with me on what's happening in the world or not.